Hey guys, it's Yuta. So, in my previous video, I mentioned that when I was little or much younger, I didn't know that people around the world watched anime. And I got so many comments saying that it was strange that I didn't know. But if you know my background, there's nothing strange about it whatsoever. So, I'm going to explain that. First, the most important information is that I'm a Japanese person who was born and grew up in Japan. And throughout my early teens, I only spoke Japanese and I almost only interacted with Japanese people. And when I grew up and where I grew up, I didn't see almost no foreigners at all. It was nothing like Tokyo today, where you see all kinds of people from all over the world. Now, let's talk about anime, because growing up in Japan, anime was always around. One of the first anime that I remember watching is Anpanman, which is still popular today. Another one that I remember watching early on is Panda Ko Panda, which is said to be the precursor of My Neighbor Totoro, which of course I watched later on. And don't forget Doraemon, which I really liked, and I continued watching it after I was too old for Anpanman. And there's just too many Japanese anime that I watched, I can't even remember them all. But here are some of the anime that I watched when I was little, so let me know how many you know. Now, all those Japanese anime were made in Japan. They were written in Japan, produced in Japan, dubbed in Japan, and made for Japanese people. I doubt any of those creators thought about foreign countries when they made those anime. And most of those anime took place in Japan. So from my perspective, anime was something that is very local. And nobody told me that people around the world watched anime. Actually, not many people told me about foreign countries at all. And most people around me didn't speak anything other than Japanese. And that was before the internet was common, let alone YouTube. So let me ask you a question. In that situation, would it be reasonable to assume that people around the world go out of their way to find Japanese anime, translate them, and watch them? Of course not. Actually, it would be pretty absurd to assume that those local products were popular around the world. For example, do you know this person? Well, she's a very popular artist in Uganda. So would it be reasonable for Ugandan people to assume that she's popular worldwide? Of course not. And think about Japanese novels, for example, because I think novels have as much potential as anime to be popular all over the world. Harry Potter is very popular internationally. And with Japanese writers, Haruki Murakami is very popular around the world. So Japanese novels could be potentially popular internationally. But except for a few famous ones like Haruki Murakami, how many Japanese writers do you know? These Japanese authors are very popular in Japan, yet how many of them do you know? And let's say you are a Japanese person who doesn't know Haruki Murakami is popular around the world. If you don't have that information, how would you know that Haruki Murakami is popular among all those writers? There's no way you can tell. And anime is kind of the same. Unless you have the information that it's popular in other countries, you just can't guess. And I didn't have that information. But today, of course I know that anime is popular in many countries. But how did I learn about it? It was in my early teens, I think. People told me that they watched Dragon Ball in the United States. They also told me that they don't show blood on TV, so they edit out all the scenes with blood. But I don't know if it's true or not, so let me know if you know. Anyway, I had a chance to go to the US in my early teen, even though I don't remember if I saw any anime. And that was before Pokemon was popular, I think. But I do remember seeing Super Nintendo in the United States. And guess what? I also didn't know that people played Super Nintendo around the world. I didn't even know it was called Super Nintendo in English. So I was like, okay, American kids also play Super Nintendo. That's interesting. But I didn't speak English, so I couldn't ask all those cultural questions. But later on in my life, I learned about the international anime fandom. As my English improved, I started meeting more people from other countries. And I noticed that people who come to Japan tend to be super into anime, and they know about anime way more than I do. Then, in my 20s, I started learning French, so I started meeting a lot of French people. And I learned there's actually many French people who are very into anime. I even watched anime in French so that I could learn French. And that was actually my excuse to watch anime. I was like, oh, I'm not just watching anime, I'm learning French. Fun times. And then I went to France as an exchange student and I made lots of friends with other international students. And one of them is the Italian girl that I mentioned in my previous video. She wasn't really interested in Japan or Asian culture in general, but one day she mentioned that she liked Sailor Moon. And I think up to the point, people who mentioned anime were the kind of people who were somewhat interested in Japan. And that was when I realized that some people in other countries watch anime casually, even though they're not interested in Japan or anything. And that's exactly the same with the average Japanese people. We are not obsessed with anime, but if there's something interesting, we watch it. But my discovery didn't end there, because then I started listening to Latin music and learning Spanish. I would listen to Latin music on YouTube. And you know, sometimes when I upload music, they add random clips and drawings. And I noticed sometimes those songs in Spanish, they have random anime clips. And there's this song that consists entirely of Evangelion clips. And that was really interesting to me because in my mind, Latin music is just very far from anime. It has nothing to do with anime. And yet, people just add anime clips. So I thought, maybe anime is pretty popular in Latin America. And sure, it was. Eventually, I visited some Latin American countries. And there were, of course, people who are very interested in Japan. But there were also other people who would watch anime casually. And some of them didn't even know that their favorite anime was from Japan. And they asked me, oh, is this from Japan? And I was like, yeah, it's from Japan. And I was very happy about it. And in the Dominican Republic, they told me that their former president was so into Dragon Ball that he would finish his speech early to watch Dragon Ball. Although other people told me it's just an urban myth. But yeah, Dragon Ball does seem pretty popular over there. And that was my personal experience. But today, I think more Japanese people are aware that anime is pretty popular in many countries. There's more information out there. TV often talks about it. There's YouTube, there's smartphones, and there's more foreigners in Japan. But they don't necessarily know to what extent anime is popular in other countries. Because seeing something on TV is one thing. Hearing something from other people is one thing. But really experiencing it yourself is totally different. Before going to Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, I did know that anime is pretty popular in Asia. I even saw that a new Detective Conan film was available in a major cinema in Thailand. But I had no idea that Doraemon was so popular in Vietnam. It was just all over the place. There were stuffed Doraemon, Doraemon clock, Doraemon tofu, Doraemon coaster, comic books in Vietnamese, and even an edible Shizuka-chan bun. Even in Japan, you don't come across so many Doraemon, except maybe in Roppongi Hills from time to time. So there's just so many things that you don't know unless you go and visit the place. And it's actually pretty interesting that many of you guys didn't know that I didn't know that anime was popular around the world. And this shows that there's so much cultural gap between Japanese culture and your culture. And many things about Japanese culture are not translated. So, if you want to learn about Japanese culture, you need to understand Japanese. And if you want to learn Japanese with me, I can send you some free Japanese lessons by email. So click the link and subscribe to my email group, Japanese with Yuta. Alright, see you guys soon. Ciao, ciao.